So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another custom scenario from DF Morris. Today, we will have Umbar defending a settlement against a Haradrim betrayal as they come seeking the bounty of the sea, albeit the sea isn't actually right next to this settlement. There is a river that I would assume the idea is that that leads out to the sea. Regardless, the Haradrim want to claim this location and the supplies within for themselves. I suppose it must be quite harsh out in the desert after all, and so they are going to be here trying to wrest control of this area away from the Black Numenorians. And there are also going to be two reinforcing Umbar armies that will come in to try and save the settlement. So not unlike the siege of Fornoster Rhine that we saw previously. I'm not sure what to call this settlement. CALDUN is probably what I'll settle on. In terms of where it is on the map, it probably makes the most sense that this would be it, and that's not directly on the coast either, so it would have to be fed by rivers somehow. Irregardless of that, we will be going through the attackers first and foremost, as we often do, with this little army that's in the corner in this little patch of greenery. Weird to see evergreen trees here, but I'm sure they're just meant to be standard trees if anything. Mr. Sneakman playing as one of the Haradrim armies. Mumakil, questionable usefulness, the Mumakil, as we've seen several times in the past. They certainly look very impressive, and it's nice that they're on the field just for the thematics of it. But I wouldn't be expecting the Mumakil to devastate the Umbar lines. Umbar have got plenty of tools that they can use to chip away the Mumakil at range, but more importantly, they've got all the things they would need in melee to burn them down very quickly, including pikes and other nasty anti-cavalry options. Other Muhards are here as well. Interesting to see if these Haradrim armies are themed individually. The Beast Tamers are a Phalanx unit, so this sort of unit will be important to the Haradrim because they will need to equalise against the Umbar quality at the high end somehow. But seeing as it is a 4v4 siege, you would actually expect the Haradrim to be bringing more of their heavy hitters than the other way round. Having said that, Harad is still somewhat fragile in comparison to the Umbar elites. Muhad Berserkers, armour piercing is one tool that Harad of course can bring in great numbers, and that is going to be useful against Umbar because a lot, well all really, of their very best units outside of the Rangers I suppose are going to be susceptible to that armour piercing, and if you're doing your job properly as Umbar, you shouldn't really be letting the Rangers get engaged by that kind of infantry unit anyway. More Muhad Berserkers, some Muhad Beast Hunters, Javelins, something else which can be used to equalise the fight when things get close and personal. Muhad Warriors, they've got a nice shield value, but other than that they've got very light armour, and individually they're not all that impressive, but they do come in great numbers once again. Harad of course trading in survivability for attack as well, so while they're not the strongest units at keeping themselves alive in melee, they will do a little bit more damage than units of a similar kind before they go down. Is that more Mumakil? It is indeed. 2 units of Mumakil will be hard to use appropriately in this sort of setting, I think. There's more Muhad Warriors there. And then just an Aztec version of Stonehenge is in here as well. How remarkable. There's also some Muhad Beast Masters here as well, so camels. So yeah, this is more of a deep south of the sort of a far Harad army, if you will, made up of Muhads and Mumakils and their beasts of burden. Muhad Beastmasters will be useful for dealing with any sort of Umbar cavalry that may be on the field today, but also their javelins can be used against infantry lines as well. This is an army which will be coming a little bit later on. The clutch of 3 armies that will be approaching the settlement right from the off, starting off with Dabba Duba GR. He's got some Hashari Shadows, possibly. Even in the update they should be keeping their body piercing. They and the Grey Company may be the only body piercing projectile units in the game off the top of my head when the update comes. And that's a very significant tool for Harad to have, but for now, mounted rangers will just be used as they will. Serpent Guard, so yet more cavalry. It'll be interesting to see how all of these mounted units can be used for Harad, because if Umbar really dig in on that settlement, it will be quite hard for them to use this cavalry effectively, but perhaps more so against the reinforcing armies this will be more useful. In and amongst it we can also see some upgraded dismounted Serpent Guard. They're a very capable unit of line infantry. Overall, you would certainly back the Alcarondas Legion to outperform the dismounted Serpent Guard, generally speaking. But the Haradrim may very well have more of that quality that they can rely on in this battle than Umbar do. Dismounted Serpent Guard, no, that's not it. We want the Black Serpents, there they are. The Bodyguard tier Lancer that Harad have. They're very, very quick, very good to cover ground with, but they're not quite as robust as a lot of other units of this type, especially not when they're fighting off against Knights, which, of course, Umbar have got 2 options for that. Southron Archers for a bit of a ranged presence. A few units of Southron Pikes, which can be useful for the armour piercing, but very low stats, as I keep mentioning. It's a very a unit of two halves, really, in terms of the good and the bad that they bring to the table. The armour piercing should be useful. The key, really, is just to make sure that you support them and don't send them into the slaughter on their own, because they won't do very well once their formation is compromised. More Muhad Beast Hunters. We have some Hashari Stalkers, so plenty of body piercing in this particular army. And then, of course, the Trollman and the Champions of Nafarat, the real X factor that Harad brings to the table in terms of infantry, because this is something that even the Black Numenorians will be very concerned about, and they may have to deal with them through other means. Then we have Froggy, who has got the Black Serpents as well, so he too will be able to cover ground quickly. Southron Warband, which for a cheaper unit, the armour piercing that they have, they're very similar in many ways to the Heavy Goblin Spears over in the Misty Mountains. So yeah, the armour piercing will be useful against Umbar, but don't rely on them to outright win fights that you put them in. More Trollmen, we have some more Dismounted Serpent Guard with the armour upgrades once again. More Southron Pikemen, and then over here we also have some more Muhad Beast Hunters. His Champions of Nafarat are over here sticking out as well. And he's got some Serpent's Fangs, which they're the exception to the rule really in the Haradrim roster, in that they can engage in a skirmish fight just fine because their armour is heavy enough to do so. There is only one such example for Harad though, so they will still find themselves greatly outnumbered by the more heavily armoured Umbar skirmishers. Harad may have to rely on being a little bit more aggressive and fast if they wish to make good progress through that settlement. And finally, it looks as though they've already taken this little outer fortress, because I can't imagine the Haradrim would have actually built such a thing themselves. That's more of a sort of, I know it's just a generic medieval 2 building, but that seems like the sort of thing the Numenorians would build more so than the Haradrim, and they have just taken it and have set up camp around it. Finally we have Mevin, who has got Southron Warband, Southron Pikemen, so a core of this armour piercing that you would expect, Javelins, Trollmen, one unit of Demons of the Desert. This could be really vital. We saw in the last replay that Harad fought on the really long siege of Tal al-Jaf, as I coined it. The Demons of the Desert actually didn't pull their weight in that fight at all. They were unveiled too early, and as a result they were really just dumpstered by the Gondorian skirmishers. It could be a very similar story here, albeit the Haradrim on the attack, because Umbar have got very similar strengths in terms of their skirmishers. Champions of Nafarat, Southron Raiders, which is interesting, an entry-level horse archer. You don't see that often for Harad, which is neat to see. Several units of Dismounted Serpent Guard, and finally another unit of the Serpent's Fangs. So, moving over to CALDUN, as I will call it from here on, seems like the best choice. We have Morris himself, playing as one of the Umbar armies. Got some Belagaya footmen in the gap, fighting men of Umbar. Got some Corsair Blackguards who are meant to represent the mariners of the city, all of the Corsairs, which should go without saying really, because that's what the Corsairs are. The Blackguards could be really, really handy for dealing with stuff like the Trollmen as well, just to make sure that you do tons of damage to them before they're able to lay down the beating in melee. Catapult could be really, really useful as well. Belagaya Archers good for the skirmish. Over here we have got 2 units of the Corsair Crossbows, which offer a really nice bit of punch. The Corsair Savages, which are not a unit which is in Umbar's standard roster anymore, but still exist like several other units that were removed in earlier versions of the game. They are, of course, a very easy to kill, but with a surprising amount of bite unit of entry level shock infantry. You could look at them as being very similar to something like the Orc Maulers from Mordor, really. Similar story with the Corsair Pikemen. They were removed, which, I mean, the Belagaya Pikes do that job now, but this is more for the thematics of it. Obviously, this is a city that's meant to have a ton of mariners in it, so the Corsair Pikemen represent that with Corsair Savages. This is a relatively low tier army as a result, being so Corsair heavy though, so that could be part of the balancing of the game. A couple of units of Belagaya footmen to represent the actual fighting men, Corsair Fencers. Also got the Naruna Iru Royal Guard, so there are some Black Numenorians present in the city, and they can of course skirmish with the Haradrim all day long. Even the Serpent's Fangs won't come out of that fight on top. Castamir's Rangers, obviously Rangers very, very powerful in a siege. Naruna Iru Sentinels, and some Harbingers of Castamir back here as well. So some units of genuine quality, but a lot of more basic Corsairs. The other player that's in this settlement with him is Bogdan 19k, not playing as the Dwarves this time. Corsair Blackguards once again. I'd imagine it's going to be a similar story with quite a few Corsairs here. They've managed to make things grow on sand, which is, again, foul sorcery if you ask me. Corsair Crossbowmen, Corsair Fencers, more Corsair Crossbowmen. Back over here we have some of the Black Numenorians, the Harbingers of Castamir, and the Naruna Iru Sentinels, which are really, really good in a skirmish fight. Them. And where's the rest of his army then? Is it all hiding? Is such a thing possible? No, there it is. I was just blind. Belagaya Footmen, Corsair Pikemen, Corsair Savages. And then on the front we've got some Corsair Infantry as well, which is a nice multi-purpose unit. They can double as light infantry and melee quite easily. Very similar to the Lake Town units from Dale. Naru Royal Guard, infantry, and some Balagai footmen. The reinforcements, which will be coming at some undetermined time, Eclipse 2500 off the Dark Cloud has got some Balakith marksmen. They will really be dominant in the skirmish fight against a faction as lightly armoured as the Haradrim. Plenty of cavalry as well, so Ardenian Lancers, Corsair Blackguards, Shield Guard, Balakith Axe Guard. So yeah, this is a genuine fighting force. Here are the Alcarondas Legion, the core of any good Umbar force. The anchors very apt on the shields of the Balakith shield bearers today, although the Mace Men won't actually be that useful against Harad. They'll be there for more their defensive purpose. Royal Guard and Harbingers of Castamere as well. I don't know when they will be activated, probably not right away, otherwise it kind of defeats the point of having reinforcements in the first place. There is a little Umbar encampment here though, so I'd imagine they will come a little bit later on. And finally we have glorious Kazakhstan. We have got some Alcarondas Legion, Balakith Axe Guard, Ardenian Shield Guard are here on the front line as well, very similar Balakith, the Shield Bearers. All the armour upgrades are applied to all the Balakith units as well, so you can tell this is a well outfitted army, not willing to give up their bountiful location here Umbar to the Southrons. Blackguards here as well, and more cavalry, Alcarondas Faithful, Ardenian Lancers. Alcarondas Faithful will be very, very dangerous to a lot of the Haradrim cavalry, and they may wish to use their Javcav. It's quite a long way for the Haradrim to march, at least right from the off. So I will make a little bit of a cut here, and we'll rejoin when the battle is beginning, be that the outer armies engaging the Haradrim right from the off, or if that's the Haradrim actually assaulting the settlement itself. So this is quite interesting. It is going to be the outer armies that are going to engage first. The cavalry going to move forward, the Hashari Shadows already ripping shots through the Ardenian Lancers, although from the front their heavy armour and shields should help them a bit, but still it is pretty serious damage that Rangers are known for dishing out. Lancer to Lancer, you would back the more heavy Umbar cavalry in straight up fights like this, but they've already taken a little bit of damage, so the Serpent Guard might not do too badly. Black Serpents will of course defeat the Ardenian Lancers because of their additional hit point, but it's the Alcarondas Faithful that Harad really needs to be careful of here. The Serpent Guard not doing so well as they have to take on two of the heavy Umbar riders. More Haradrim cavalry will be forthcoming, I'm sure, and the footmen are also on the way. Three of the Haradrim armies potentially will be fighting off against these Umbar forces here though, but these Umbar armies are serious business. If you are going to engage them right from the off, you should deal with them and overwhelm them first before going anywhere near the city itself. Because this is where the true power of the defenders actually lies, in their reinforcing armies. The defenders within the settlement are more reliant on more basic units. Here come more Ardenian Lancers, hunting down this more depleted unit of Serpent Guard, the lighter nature of the Haradrim. They're trying to take straight up fights with Umbar, which is not all that recommended. They may just be trying to buy time for the Hashari Shadows to do their thing, but with Southron Pikemen on the way forward, and they will be able to get towards this cavalry line before the heavy infantry from Umbar manages to do so, overlooking the city over here. The Haradrim will be wishing that they had a bit of Luminorian heritage. A trebuchet from up here would be able to shoot right into the initial layer of the city. Black Serpents coming forward, still in much better shape than the Serpent Guard that are around them, but here you can see Warlords from Eclipse now moving forward. And Umbar, when you have access to Knights, you're always going to dominate on horseback against a faction that doesn't. This really is the ultimate showcase of that, and why the cavalry balance probably does need to change for the next patch, which by the time this battle comes out will probably be very much upon us. But yeah, some of the entry-level cavalry does need to be increased in effectiveness, and the Ardenian Lancers do fall into that bracket as well. The gap between bodyguard cavalry and non-bodyguard cavalry is just a bit too high, because even the Black Serpents did pretty well here. We've got the basic Southron Raiders moving forward as well from Mevon, also going to be ripping shots, maybe not going to have all that much of an impact on the infantry core of Umbar here, because they are very heavily armoured, and perhaps a sign that they do need to be a bit aggressive here against the Umbar infantry forces do Harad. But Harad also does look as though the two armies in the north are going to be heading towards the settlement, so it is going to be 2 versus 2, and that is actually potentially a real problem for Harad. I'm not sure 2 on 2 whether they have what it takes to bring down armies of this quality when they're more reliant on stuff like Southrons. Yes, they've got Trollmen, which can be a real problem. Champions of Nafrat are probably the single best unit of infantry between the two in terms of matching up against one another. I would rate them above the Harbingers of Castamere in that regard because of the heavy AP focus they have. They do have more Rangers perhaps on the outer limits of the settlement. It is interesting this. I feel as though for Umbar it's a little bit simpler. Harad will really be what decides the outcome over here. They can either win the fight for themselves or lose it. Eclipse is also getting some of his units within the settlement, so that is a sign as well that perhaps Harad needs to get a bit of a shift on here, because if Eclipse is sending this many units over here, then that means that the outer army is not going to be quite so strong and you should be able to overwhelm them, but it also means that they're going to be fortifying the main settlement. Some of that classic Medieval 2 bridge pathfinding making itself apparent. Not entirely sure what Umbar are doing here. They are going to try and retreat, maybe get back into a position in their encampment perhaps? Certainly a more defensive position, and with some of their resources being siphoned off to try and defend the settlement, that would be perhaps wise. Could also, however, give Harad the excuse to just leave one army as a bit of a rear guard to block them from moving from that position and then attack the settlement from the bridge direction as well. We'll have to wait and see. Mevin is over here. The Mumakil are here as well. There's a lot of Corsair pikemen in there though. The Mumakil could be quite handy at attacking from the front, but there is also as well a few units that we missed. Not the Muhad Beast Tamers, but the War Beasts of Harad. They're almost like a much more difficult to use version of the Bjornings in terms of the huge charge that they're capable of laying down, but they are somewhat fragile. Fortunately they don't run amok anymore. There was a time where if you just hit them with any sort of fire arrows they'd immediately run amok, and that made them next to useless, but that is not the case anymore. As shock cavalry goes, they're useful, but how useful is shock cavalry going to be when Umbar are already dug in? This is also quite a glass cannony army, considering how focused it is around the Muhad tribesmen. Over here, meanwhile, Black Serpents moving forward, actually mopping up elements of the Umbar cavalry which is still here. They're trying to get away, but I mean, the Southron cavalry should be able to catch up to them, and that should be that for that poor unit of 12 riders. Even the Southron raiders, as weak as they are as cavalry and melee, are going to get what they want via numbers, if not quality. But they're going to try and make a play right for the settlement. Well, I mean, it's up to Harad to block them from doing this, I suppose. Harad do need to get a bit of a shift on if they are going to stop Eclipse and Kazakhstan from reinforcing the settlement itself, and then the situation becomes very, very difficult for Harad if that becomes the case. With those genuine Numenorian and higher quality heavy infantry units mixed in and amongst the Corsairs that are already here, it becomes a very difficult task, I think, for Harad to then wrest control of the settlement away from Umbar. But we shall see. There is apparently a unit still out here. What is going on out here? Something's going on. Ah, I see. It's a routing unit that's stuck on the rock. He is phased through the level geometry, and it's not looking good for him because the champions of Nafarat are about to come in here and give him the business. He's really eager to run away, as would you be if the champions of Nafarat were coming after you. And there we go. Short and sweet, to the point, and it looks like we're having another larger scale cavalry skirmish down here, which should be going the way, I would imagine, of Umbar, given the fact they've got the Alcarondas Faithful over here, and indeed it is. They've got they've got Hashari Shadows in here. I hope they've used up all their ammunition, otherwise it's a extreme waste of potential. Southern Raiders haven't used up their ammunition, but then they're a little bit less important. They are going to try and skirmish the Ardenheim Lancers around. Not all that successfully because they were caught on their heels a little bit. The Hashari Shadows are going to get away from there as well. Black Serpents cresting over the dune. I mean, it is mostly Ardenheim Lancers. It is only the Alcarondas Faithful that have got that genuine power spike. Black Serpents are going to try and go through the Ardenheim Lancers. They will be successful at that, but they really want to avoid the Alcarondas Faithful if at all possible. As the Harad infantry continues to move forward. Looks like they're going to set up over here instead. I think he realises trying to traverse a singular bridge for an entire army is not really the best idea when Harad are hot on their heels, because that would give Daba Duba all the opening he needs. But if he can just sit out here, buy more time. Eclipse has already got a lot of his heavier units within the settlement now. And now you can see Balakith Marksman starting to open up on the Southron Pikemen of all things. Daba Duba maybe making a little bit of a mistake, hoping to screen the cavalry, which is all well and good, but that gives the ideal opening for something like Balakith Marksman to really start doing a lot of damage to the Haradrim. They are going to do a lot of damage here to the Southron pikemen. They're not really what you would call a fully disposable unit because of how useful they can be. They can punch well above their weight in terms of what they cost, so you don't want to throw them away quite so easily, especially as how many kills you can offer Umbar there. There are some Hashari shadows. Alcaronda's Faithful looking a little bit more depleted than they were. The Black Serpents are also going to be able to get a rear charge into them, although the charge somewhat misses. The Alcaronda's Faithful could turn around and win this fight. They have a numbers advantage as well, so I'm somewhat confused as to why they're not doing that. Then over here, Southron Raiders, who are very tired at this point, having tried to give those units of Ardnheim Lancers to run around. Southron Pikemen are moving forward, and like I said earlier, you really need to support the Southron Pikemen if you're going to get the best out of them. You can see here as well, Mr. Sneakman is coming across over here, not going to charge the settlement head on, instead he's going to try and fight more out in the open plain against Kazakhstan's army, which is the best use, I think, of the Mumakil. The Mumakil can cause a lot of havoc here in this army, which is being left as a more of a rearguard action against two Haradrim armies. With the Mumakil in tow as well, you should be able to make this Umbar force lose its cohesion. Got to be careful of the Alcaronda's Faithful though, they can get in the way a little bit. I'm not sure what on earth Harad are thinking here. Sending them forward, like, if you send forward a really low tier of fodder that are somewhat shielded, but a la the Orc fodder or Goblin infantry, this is a little bit more understandable, but Southron pikemen are useful in melee. More to the point, they're so easy for archers to kill. Both of the things you don't want to be sending in as archer fodder. And now this one unit of Southron pikemen is also going to get overrun by heavy infantry. Balakith's shield bearer is going to get around the flank as well. Dabaduba's army far too stretched. And Froggy also dragging his heels a little bit, you'd have to say. His infantry has been trying to go around the flank. You could say that Dabaduba is at fault here as well for committing those units and pikes too early, and I would agree. But if your ally is making a mistake, you can try and compensate for that a little bit by shifting your units into a faster gear. And he has been continuing to walk. Meanwhile, there are some Serpent Guard on the front line now as well, which will be pretty handy against something like the Ardenium Shield Guard. Heavy armour will make the dismounted Serpent Guard's task a little bit tougher, but I mean they will out-damage the Shield Guard certainly. In come the Balakith Axe Guard as well though. They will be more of a problem for the Serpent Guard, especially with a charge like that. Pretty clean charge as far as shock infantry goes. A bit difficult to use in Medieval 2 effectively. Warlords of Umbar thinking about breaking out, and they will do, and the Champions of Nafra are in full view of the charge, and they will get a good charge there. That is, again, not the best of approaches here by Dabaduba, you would have to say. I mean, the Champions of Nafra have got multiple HP, so they will weather that charge better than most, but that is damage they have now taken that they could have avoided. Forward come the Mumakil, and they are going to be going through the lines. Alcaronda's Legion. If you can keep them moving the Mumakil, then they can cause all sorts of havoc. If you leave them to sit in melee against a lot of these more elite Umbar units, I mean, I suppose against the line infantry it's not so bad, but as soon as you get against the higher damage shock infantry, any pikes that are present as well, you really don't want the Mumakil hanging around too long in there. There you can see that they're already getting bloodied up as Umbar start to do the damage, and of course Mumakil corpses are solid entities on the field, so they can get in the way, which we'll see if that is a blessing or a curse to either side. War beasts are over there as well. Much sparser over here as far as Haradrim presence goes. Southron pikemen gone. Southron archers are going to be firing into the back there, presumably against the Balakith Axe Guard. Trollmen will dominate against shield bearers, but numbers-wise and how this engagement is initially set up, Umbar won't be too displeased. They should go on to lose this fight as the fight wears on, but they will be getting some good kills here. Not bad use of the Mumakil, you'd have to say, though, and they are breaking the Umbar lines, which could be, I mean, it's not often you see Umbar break. I mean, Balakith units aren't full-blooded Black Numenorians, so they don't have the locked morale trait. But Umbar are a difficult faction to break in numbers. Mumakil, of course, have got that ranged attack as well, which is going to be chipping away. We've also got the initial assaults happening over here now. Corsair crossbowmen going to be firing at Mevon's dismounted Serpent Guard as they move forward. He's actually presenting a big target of himself there. I'm a little bit surprised he's not going right up the pipe to go that way. Because it's not as if this entryway is that much better for him. I suppose they want to attack both sides at once, but one school of thought says you should wait for that assault to begin until you have mopped up this Umbar army out here, and you're also attacking from the southern edge of the settlement, as well as the eastern approach. We shall see. Actually, with how the sea is orientated, it's probably the wrong way around. It probably would be the Belfalas Sea would be west of CALDUN. But still, this heavy Umbar infantry is winning in several places along the front. It's really where the trollmen are that things are going Harad's way. The Mumakil are starting to drop in large quantities now, but that's about as much as you can hope for from the Mumakil as they work in Reforged, and some of them are also running amok now as well. They disrupted the Umbar lines. You can't ask for too much more than that, and Harad have taken advantage of that, getting up and around the flank with some beast hunters and some trollmen. So the outer encampment is going to be secured by the Haradrim, and Kazakhstan's glorious last stand will begin. And I think, while it's always a bit of a bummer if you're the first player to lose their entire army, especially if there's still a long way in the fight to go, you've always got to look at it like this. Could you have done any more? And were you efficient in what you did? I think for Umbar it's as good as they could have hoped for. If they tried to cross the bridges like Eclipse did, they would have been caught on the bridges with half their army, and half their army would have been sticking out over here, and Harad would have slaughtered them, especially with rangers in tow. It would have been a nightmare. Letting Eclipse get into the town, banking up a heavy infantry corps, and standing out here and getting some good kills, especially on some of the more entry-level Haradrim units. Their numbers out here have certainly been blunted. I don't think either side will be too displeased with this. It looks devastating for Harad when you see that many Mumakils scattered across the front line, almost perfectly so. But yeah, there's still a few Mumakil, and they have actually reformed, although I think there's a bug, unless I'm very much mistaken, unless it was fixed, where when units run amok, even if they come back, you don't regain control over them, and they just sort of stand there. But to be fair, with their ranged attacks, they could still be a little bit useful. Alcarondas Legion are here doing their best, but again, the Trollman really will be outperforming them as we see it over here. Still not attacking directly, and this is still giving a really good target. It looks as though, I mean, this unit, of course, their crossbows could have already used up all their ammunition with the fact that they've got their harpoons out. This unit, not so much. There's plenty of Haradrim corpses over here, and they continue to fire in. There's plenty of good targets for them to go after as well. I mean, Champions of Nafarat, Demons of the Desert would be one of the first ports of call. Mr. Sneakman has been microing his cavalry on the other side, but his Muhars will be required to start beginning the assault on the settlement itself. Are we seeing any sort of engagement? We are, actually. Umbar coming outside of the settlement a little bit. A good combination of a defensive unit in the Balagaya Footmen and an aggressive unit in the Corsair Savages, but, I mean, in terms of numbers, they could overwhelm the dismounted Serpent Guard and win. The quality seems to be having a bit of an impact at the moment. I mean, the Corsair Savages really do a very poor job at keeping themselves alive in melee. More Haradrim are going to be arriving all the time as well. So it is what it is. Looks like Umbar are going to try and get some units across. Glorious Kazakhstan still wants something to do in the later stages. And he's saving Naran Ira Royal Guard, so that's all well and good. War Beasts of Harad not getting quite the charge they would have wanted because they bumped into their own Muhar Beastmasters as well. Javelins are going to try and do the business against the Royal Guard, I would assume. Most important unit they could go after, and this unit of Balaketh Marksmen is also going to get across the bridge, but I do like the fact that they are a very savage unit, the War Beasts of Harad, with the fact they use those bone clubs. It's very Polynesian, actually, their choice of weaponry. Beastmasters leaving. Balaketh Marksmen being left behind to cover the retreat. There's the Southron Raiders doing a little bit of damage. The War Beasts doing their best to hunt down this unit of Balaketh Marksmen. Not easy to get a charge on the bridges though. And in sustained melee, because of their numbers, the Balaketh Marksmen would actually win this fight. How useful would the Beasts be later on? Well, potentially quite useful actually. So you don't want to throw them away for absolutely no gain whatsoever. What have we got here? There's still some Umbar units out here. Harad probably regrouping for a genuine assault on the settlement now. Probably you've got some Hashari as well. Again, their projectiles will be useful. There's still fighting going on over here, so some, I would assume, yes indeed, Black Numenorian infantry continuing to fight in the shadow of one of the fallen Mumakil, but with Trollmen, armour-piercing Muhards, even just the basic South ones, I mean, they're going to be overwhelmed here, but it does go to show how useful the lock morale trait can be, because they are holding the Haradrim assault up, when really the assault that's happening over here would want them to get a bit of a shift on, really. Meanwhile, Corsair Crossmen joining the front line, but the quality of the Haradrim should be starting to come through. Corsair Blackguards over there. Corsair Crossbowmen in close attenders, with another unit of Balagai footmen joining the front. Corsair Crossbows there, trying to shelter a little bit here, Mevin. This, I would assume this is what Mr. Sneakman's Muhard army is going to be attacking first and foremost. But yeah, with Mevin really the only one actually laying assault to one of the choke points that leads into the settlement itself. His allies, whether they were ready or not, they do need to hurry up, because otherwise Mevin will be taking some pretty serious damage. You can see Bogdan is covering this bridge, and with glorious Kazakhstan, I mean, there's a little bit of a presence of the Haradrim over on this side with the war beasts from Mr. Sneakman getting over here as well. But Eclipse is also banked up over here. Little jetties, natural jetties. Serpent's Fangs moving in. And they are a pretty big cavalry unit as well, a big chunky cavalry unit that isn't really focused around armour. Much like the Bjornings, that is something else they share in common with them. Plenty of HP, but no armour to speak of. I mean, they're continuing to harass these Balakith marksmen as they move back, and they've done a decent job. I mean, there's a bit of friendly fire coming in there as well, it must be said. How useful would they have been later on? Depends if Harad... on how the very last engagements were going. If there was an opportunity to form a gap and hammer an anvil charge later on, they might wish they still had those war beasts, because they can be devastating in that situation. But time will tell. If Umbar can cover their bases, then it wouldn't have made the difference, but it's always nice to have a bit of cavalry in the back pocket. Meanwhile, more and more Umbar reinforcements heading onto this front line, and Harad being made to pay for that. Serpent's Fangs firing in. Morale debuff could be effective against all of these Corsairs. Savages as well will just take straight up a lot of damage from even a more defensive archer like the Serpent's Fangs. Not a huge amount of base damage from the Serpent's Fangs, but the Corsair Savages wear no armour at all. They didn't have an armour upgrade, which was kind of interesting, but it is not present today. Still Morris not having to worry about Mr. Sneakman's tribal army just yet. At the moment, this is the only action on the field. More crossbow bolts coming in, and very understandable considering the presence of a unit of trollmen on the front. That will be Umbar's main focus. Now that they've got some heavy infantry reinforcing into the city, they won't worry too much about the overall quality level, but they will worry about all of the trollman units and the damage spikes that they can cause, even to the desert, of course, first and foremost, but the melee versions as well. Not the sort of thing that Umbar will be looking to fight straight up in a fair fight. Overwhelming them with numbers and hitting them with crossbow bolts is what they will want to do. Speaking of which, I mean, the Demons of the Desert getting very close to the front line already. Again, we could be seeing the Demons of the Desert poke their head over the trench a little bit too early in this fight as well from Harad. I mean, he could get a really nasty shot here, but if Umbar are paying any attention whatsoever, they will see the Demons of the Desert. Yeah, and immediately you can see them, and they're going to try and make the front line less of a blob. And they're getting shot. Mevin needs to get them out of there. Balagai footmen getting off the front line for the time being. Of course, our Savages fighting hard. More poison arrows. Again, a bit scattered. The fight is not going so poorly for Umbar that the Balagai units and the Corsairs will be thinking of routing for the time being, but any extra damage that can be done will be a blessing. Yeah, the Demons of the Desert fall back. Losses taken though. Mevin's army is not going to be able to do this indefinitely without any sort of support. He's got some Trollmen back across there as well, some of his Southron Pikemen, all of Mr. Sneakman's infantry units as well. What is happening over here? I mean, what angle is Dabaduba going to try and take? Is he going to try and go across here? Because this does look like it's a ford. Indeed it is. You can actually see it for once in the clearness of the water. He can get over here and support from this side. That might be what they try and do. Or they could cross that bridge, but that bridge looks like a... I wouldn't cross that bridge to start with. Bridges are always a bit of a pain anyway. Froggy is going to start testing the waters by sending some infantry across, some South Front Warband. But you're going to need more than a unit of South Front Warband. Like, they could be swallowed whole as soon as they get across this bridge if Eclipse wants to be aggressive and take them out. I think you do need to be aggressive as Harad here. Like, playing the long game against Umbar, you're not going to win a war of attrition as Harad against Umbar. Not now that they've got those heavier units in the settlement, I don't think. Surrounded by the support of the Corsairs. I don't think that's how it's going to work. We'll see. South Front Warband getting into action. Some of these poison arrows doing the business against the Corsair crossbowmen. Plenty of Corsair crossbowmen. I mean, there's a lot of crossbowmen that Umbar have to work with here. You can see here they are getting shaken up now that they're taking a fair amount of damage. This unit of Serpent's Fangs is pretty much entirely unharmed for the time being, which is good, because they are also a potentially very useful infantry unit later on. They can hold their own in that regard. One of the more armoured Haradrim units that there are. If not the most heavily armoured Harad infantry unit, now that I come to think of it. Meanwhile, look at this. Umbar, tired of waiting around, Morris is instead deciding to counter-attack out of the settlement. This is the catalyst for Mr. Sneakman and Mevin to move forward with some of their infantry, which may prove to be a bit of a mistake by Morris, but I appreciate the fact that he was willing to come forward and engage Harad off his own back, whether that's the wise course of action or not. He is going to need a bit more of his support, I think. A lot of these more basic units won't do that well. I mean, the Corsair Pikemen will do a decent job at keeping some of these more savage tribals at arm's length. Speaking of which, though, the Corsair Savages probably going to try and show them who the real hooligans are. I mean, it's hot out. Everyone fighting with no shirt on. Who had warriors trying to find gaps. Are they trying to go after the Demons of the Desert? I mean, there's Champions of Nafra over here. So it's probably not going to go very well for them. Yeah, Harbingers of Castamere getting torn limb from limb. It was the fun move for Morris to make, but it probably wasn't the smart move. It wasn't as well executed as it could have been. Naran Iron Royal Guard and Castamere's Rangers now shooting. I mean, Castamere's Rangers could do a ton of damage if you can shoot through a bunch of Trollmen and Muhards because of the lack of armour. But the time is now, I would say, for Harad, and they would appear to agree, because far from going across that ford there, Dabaduba is instead going to attack more directly. What's going on over here? What did this damage? They're archers? Was it javelins? That looks like the sort of damage that would have been done by... Well, it is mostly Corsairs, so it could have been archers as well. Froggy banking up over there, but Naran Iron Royal Guard taking up position on the jetty as well. Getting across bridges is always a bit of a pain, and this will be a good opportunity for Umbar to get a lot of kills with their archers. Meanwhile, Serpent's Fangs shooting into the Corsair Blackguards, who are shielded at the very least, and they are actually going to beat Mevin wholesale here as a result of them potentially needing to siphon off more Harad infantry to try and deal with Morris's somewhat surprising attack. Also trying to use the artillery now to shoot into the heart of these Haradrim warriors, but yeah, it was a bold attack, but you'd have to say it has ended in failure, and now the Haradrim, perhaps emboldened by this, will look to move forward, somehow managing to get friendly fire in this sea of Haradrim units. And the hits they are scoring are not all that decisive. The RNG of artillery. Meanwhile, Corsair Crossman, a bit more of a defensive front line this now. Mevin moving forward with his Muhard Beast Hunters, emboldened by this. And where's that archer fire coming from? There's the Castamere's Rangers. And that one unit of Corsair Crossmen was very, very depleted, and Mevin identified that, and he's just going to run right through them, identifying the weak point in the front line. So they are going to have to move forward with the unit of Alcarondas Legion, which should have been there to begin with. Bit of an oversight on Umbar's part, just as a collective there. Malekith Axguard, so Eclipse's units are going to have to get into the fray pretty quickly to try and make up for the shortcomings that Morris's army will now certainly have. That a rout? It is. Goes to show the quality discrepancy between the Alcarondas Legion and some of the more basic Muhards. There is a gap forming there though. Morris needs to be quite careful with his pikemen And Eclipse needs to recognise that and perhaps back him up with some of his Alcarondas Legion. Corsair Fencers. There's some Balakathak's Guard that are going to get into position as well. I mean, there are champions of Nafrat on the front line that are maybe overextending a little bit. And with a fresh unit of Axemen, that could be just what the Doctor ordered for the Umbaran. Again, not the most devastating catapult volley, but at least they're hitting the right units this time. What have we here? A routing unit of Southron Archers. And a fight for the bridge. Balagai footmen being left on their own, so Umbar conceding probably this part of the city, and they will, I would assume, start to retreat, as Harad will try to keep the pressure on. Defeat is a distinct possibility. No Iron Royal Guard. Eclipse not showing any signs of retreating from this location. This is an open part of the settlement as well, so this is a nice choke point, but they may need to start making some decisions here, Umbar, perhaps to retreat. This is a rather open settlement in general, to be fair. There's not any really, really tight choke points that you can run. Maybe the last stand you could consider to be that over here. But with so much action still happening in the lower reaches of the city, Umbar can't just chicken out, as it were, and rely on those. They are going to have to trade their blood with the enemy for a little while longer. You can see some of the more lightweight Harajam units are not enjoying this engagement at all. Looks like this engagement over here has completely ended. Indeed it has. Naught but a pile of corpses remains. Muhad Beastmasters, so the camels on the way back over. Umbar are actually pushing over here, so they are actually, technically this is a counter-attack. Corsair Blackguards going to try and do the business. These units of infantry are going to fold, but this unit of Muhad Warriors is taking a lot of damage here. The savageness of the Corsair Blackguards there for all to see. Have they done enough damage to win this fight? Probably not. I mean, they're continuing to do damage though. Can they get another volley off? They can. All of that damage will be useful. And the low defense of the Muhad Berserkers could come back to haunt them against a unit like the Blackguards. Meanwhile, nice position here for the Balagai Archers to shoot into the back of the Harajam line. So the tide has turned a little bit over here. That assault from DF Morris didn't go very well, but conversely, the attack hasn't gone brilliantly for Harad here either. A large part of it probably has to do with the fact that a lot of their units are not that well set up to deal with skirmishers, and Umbar have been using them quite well, but also Harad have got a lot of javelins which are also doing the business now, so it's a bad day for the infantry in this part of the battle all around. Everyone taking an awful lot of damage. Nairn Royal Guard up on the hilltop over here as well. Again, more of a defensive arch. I mean, that catapult is not going to be able to get away if infantry spills through, so they may as well just dump all their ammunition now so that it's not wasted. Heading across to the other side. Umbar are actually continuing to move forward now, perhaps seeing that the reinforcements are taking a little while longer to get into position. Corsair infantry engaging. They'll do well initially. But they won't do quite so well when the Serpent Guard roll up their sleeves and get into the action as well. Corsair Fencers. They're a dangerous unit as well, to be fair. A little bit flimsy, but strong in melee. Froggy's got a few units over there, and the Nairn Royal Guard perhaps seeing their opportunity to do a bit of damage. I mean, the Serpent Guard, I think their shields will be coming into effect from that angle, but even with the armour upgrade, the Serpent Guard, while they can absorb arrow fire, fine, it's not quite to the same level as the Western Kingdom's line infantry can, so maybe not the worst idea that. Of course, our Blackguard's doing a good job here against these Muhads. They will ultimately be overwhelmed, but they will have done quite a lot of damage before succumbing. There goes one of the Harajam generals. Muhad Beast Masters. Going to try and do a bit of damage here. Not the easiest angle for them though. Yeah, this has been a real meat grinder for both sides, but yeah, you're looking at this and Umbar perhaps gaining the upper hand. There are Serpent's Fangs in melee here, but pikemen from the front. And this unit of Balakathak's Guard should be able to finish off these heavily depleted trollmen. I do prefer the Balakathaxman's weaponry now. Once upon a time in the previous patch, their axe looked more like a giant seashell on the end of a stick. Much more reasonable now. Beast Tamers are in melee, but phalanx to phalanx, the Sentinels are going to win. So yeah, I think Umbar are going to be victorious over here against the Haradrim assaults, but whether they have enough left to then deal with Dabaduba and Froggy's armies working their way through the settlements as well will be what decides this fight ultimately. It is still even. Castamir's Rangers, I think the fact that the Haradrim have got such a large portion of their army being something which is quite vulnerable to archers may be the factor that does them in here. Also, units in their roster like the Mumakil, difficult to use efficiently. Meanwhile, yeah, Umbar are going to start moving back now, I think. More of Bogdan's units. Eclipse probably going to start to filter their way back through the settlement. Plenty of this fight still to go, however. Yeah, and you can see here the Corsair infantry getting utterly overwhelmed. Trollman to add insult to injury. They are getting dealt with. Champions of Nafrat are there. More Trollman over here. Good opportunity this to maybe try and cut some of these units off at least. Froggy can move forwards. If they can stop more of the Umbar units from digging in the back corner of the settlement, that could be vital. Eclipse could forget about these units. That would be a real tragedy. Over here, yeah, Blackguard ultimately being bested by the sheer numbers of the Haradrim. But they did well. They got a lot of kills over here. I mean, this is carnage. It's really hard to tell who is gaining the best end of these engagements because both sides are taking so many losses every time there's a large-scale engagement. I just feel as though the general sense I get is that Umbar are getting just the better of this so far. And they're the defenders, so in a 4v4. Corsair Fencers taking a charge. I mean, they're not the best cavalry off the charge, the Muhard Beastmasters, but the more of this they can do, the better it will be for them. This is where the Corsair Fencers being slightly more fragile does come into play. Having a bit of cavalry, this is where the War Beasts would have been really useful actually, where now that gaps are starting to appear, their charges would have been absolutely devastating. Blackguards are here getting harassed by the Serpent's Fangs. Champions of Nafrat coming forward, disengaging. Here comes some Harbingers of Castamere again, more elements, more evidence I should say, of the chaos that this battle is. Champions of Nafrat victory seems certain, Harbingers of Castamere defeat seems certain. Although they are a little bit more isolated with javelins being flung, arrows all over the place. Harad probably don't have much left in the tank over here now at this point though really. There's some Beast Hunters I should say, some Beast Tamers, some Beast Masters. This unit of Champions of Nafrat is really the only genuine heavy hitter in infantry terms they've got left over here, but the more damage they can do, the more they can soften them up for the Haradrim armies coming up from the south. Or if the map was orientated as it should be, from the north, technically. There's still a lot of Haradrim left alive. As much as he lost his pikemen earlier on rather unnecessarily, Dabaduba's still got a lot of infantry. They've still got Ashari Stalkers as well, which could be a real problem later on. Haradrim marching through this narrow gap. Froggy won't have to deal with the Eclipse defence that I'm sure he was worried he would have to deal with in this. I mean, by this map standards, this choke point is very, very narrow. Having to deal with the rather open middle section of the settlement. It will be interesting to see what Umbar decide to do here. Because the Haradrim can still take pretty good... And again, those Harbingers of Castamere have melted as a result of the javelins from the Beastmasters, but also the melee pressure from the Champions of Nafrat. The Champions of Nafrat getting hit by archers. The ranged units on both sides have certainly racked up impressive kill counts. The infantry from both sides has been less fortunate. What's this? Belagire archers routing. Balakith marksmen routing. The Haradrim padding their kill counts a little bit, making sure they won't return from routing at the very least. And there's still some units across the way over there which we'll need to get a shift on. As I say, a little bit stretched here, Harad, and that could be another cause for their potential undoing. Of course, our Blackguards now fighting off against some Beast Hunters. Beast Hunters may have AP, but as far as an infantry unit goes, the Blackguards are much more well prepared and they will win this fight just fine. It's camels though, I mean the camels have been used well. Like, when the battle opens up like this, you really can make good use of the camels. And they are going to also pad their kill counts. Very good use of them. I still say that if they'd had those war beasts doing that job, the devastation would have been very significant. Naru Royal Guard banking their shots a little bit. What are they going after? Is it the trollmen or is it the camels? I mean, they're going to hit both in limited quantities, but again, Dabaduba is doing this where he's sending forward an individual unit. Oh, has a little bit of a bug. But yeah, this unit of infantry is not going to achieve all that much on its own. There's beast hunters nearby. Froggy again is lagging a little bit too far behind for my liking. He needs to start moving his army a little bit more quickly than he's doing, because his allies are keen to get a move on. And that means, I think, you kind of need to sprint, even if you want to preserve your fatigue. At this point, I think he needs to sprint to get into the action quickly, because a unified assault is going to do far better than the opposite. And that may be something else to Umbar also. When you're the defenders, you naturally complement one another, in a way. There's no danger of one player going and the other one's getting left behind, because you have to hold a position. Whereas for the attackers, being unified is pretty key, and oftentimes it can be the difference between victory and defeat, as we've seen several times. Oof, and those fencers tearing through those Serpent Guard. Dabaduba himself also is kind of guilty of not being unified with himself, in a way. He's sending forward some units with reinforcements lagging a little bit too far behind. There goes another Haradrim general. There's that man. Must be down here. Black Serpents that are still alive. There's more Umbar units over here, and yeah, you can see here they're trying to charge into the fences. Paid the price, and now they can flank around because they have map control over here now that the Haradrim infantry is completely gone over here. Well, the Serpent Guard did manage to kill off that general. Beast Tamers, or Beast Masters I should say, still here. Dabaduba taking shelter behind the stone structures. Corsair Fencers charging forward. Oh, and there's another big javelin volley, killing off a lot of those Corsair pikemen actually. In comes Champions of Nafrat from Mr. Sneakman. Froggy's army is now running a little bit more quickly, which is what you need to see. The Beast Hunters getting some good volleys off, and indeed they are in guard mode and continuing to just chuck those javelins, and that is probably the way they will get more kills, but it will also mean their demise will come all the faster at the hands of those Corsair Fencers. You might want to get those Trollmen into melee with them, which it does look as though that's what's going to happen. It will put the Trollmen into harm's way, but I don't think you have much of a choice at this point. Those Champions of Nafrat just clogging up those pikemen so that more of those javelins can hit their marks. More Champions of Nafrat. There's plenty of roads they can take through this more residential area of the city. The fish oligarch must live at the top of the hill. That is the final stand that Umbar could always fall back on should they need to. Naru Royal Guard, very tough unit to kill, especially for more depleted units like this, but with the support of some Champions of Nafrat, that will definitely loosen them up a little bit. Exactly what the Haradrim need. Back over here, Mr. Sneakman's Champions of Nafrat getting outright overwhelmed. Corsair Blackguards getting, those are clear projectiles, so yes it is the Hashari Stalkers trying to deny Umbar their javelins. And there they are again. Hard to see the clear projectiles when it's on a brighter map like this. Corsair Fencers doing very well actually, presumably as a result of some, there's a bit of range support coming in here to help them out against the Trollmen of Harad and what remains of those Beast Hunters they were also facing off against. What else are they firing at? They did actually manage to move the catapult back as a result of being outright victorious on that choke point over there, but the Haradrim starting to have more of a presence within the houses, more javelins, a little bit scattered, but they will do damage. Dismounted Serpent Guard against Naru Royal Guard. Interesting fight that. Naru Royal Guard are a higher tier unit, but they are a hybrid unit focused on their archery and their weapon as a spear. Whereas the Dismounted Serpent Guard, I mean, it's kind of a moot point when Champions of Nafrat are also in there. I mean, there's not really much of the Haradrim left here, so I mean, you're going to miss quite a lot of those shots. Probably need to get into a better position, but maybe this is Harad seeing that it is a bit more of a desperate situation at this point. They do need to start making some strides through if they intend to be victorious here. Froggy's infantry is finally making an appearance. He's got some of his stronger units a little bit further back as well, hoping to utilise them for the Umbar last stand that is undoubtedly being prepared. Yeah, these are good angles as well, and this is another thing that Umbar have done a little bit better than Harad as a whole over the match. You would expect the defenders to have better firing positions, but Umbar have used them well. Harad have had to be a little bit more laissez-faire with their ammunition. There goes another Umbar general there. It was this one over here as well. Killed by the champions of Neferat. There are more shameful units to lose against. Another assault here, but still the pikemen hold on. Fencers with their rapiers as well. Corsairs preferring stabbing weapons, both for fish and for enemies alike. Southron Warband moving forward from Froggy. I mean, this unit of Blackguard is holding up far too much infantry at this point. You need to force path through, get more of a genuine assault going on this front line, so that you can really start making strides, especially when you consider that those archers have got a pretty nice position to fire into you as well. Yeah, there's no way up over here, is there? This is impassable terrain, even though you would be able to make it up there in real life, of course, but impassable terrain. Can you go this way? No, that's the red line. I was going to say, you could try and go around, I suppose, but not an option. They're having to make do with just 2 angles of assault, given that they can't go this way. What's going on? They did have some units that were thinking of flanking around, but I think maybe they didn't want to overextend themselves on bar, so they took the more conservative approach. They've already been very aggressive in this battle so far already. Ooh. That was maybe not the best time to use your catapult, getting far more friendly fire than you got into the Haradrim attackers. There's plenty of time to try and remedy that, however. Here we are, the Blackguards. Really good opportunity to fire in there. Very damaging javelins, as we've already seen in this battle. Getting a good amount of damage there onto the Serpent Guard as well. Royal Guardsmen in there. Catapult continuing to fire. And the Naru Naru Royal Guard continuing to hold this little choke point all on their lonesome. Buying more time for those archers to do the business. Another shot coming in. Again, hitting primarily your own units. That catapult so far has been a bit of a disaster, at least in this phase of play. I mean, they are routing the Haradrim as a result, but more of that friendly fire and it won't be that great for them. Dismounted Serpent Guard made of slightly sterner stuff as well, so they'll stick around through such hardships. Less risks over there, but I mean, at this stage, Umbar are a little bit scattered perhaps. With some units being able to flood through here, they'll be able to clean up this area certainly, and potentially shut the catapult down as well. They will need to be fairly quick about such things, however, and they will be. They do manage to get some Beast Hunters in there, and that is enough to interrupt them. They will rout almost instantly, but they interrupted the catapult with that. So that's a good passage of play, that, from Harad. The catapult certainly not doing what Morris would have hoped it would. And now Harad able to surround, and they will be able to overwhelm this little area. There are sentinels over here, so that would be a good target for them to bring down. Corsair Fencers going up against Hashari Stalkers, out of ammunition. I mean, this is not the melee Hashari, so the Fencers are not going one-to-one with the Haradrim version of their unit. Looking like all of the Haradrim Rangers actually out of ammunition at this stage. Naru Naru Royal Guard. These fences are a little bit cut off at this point. Southron pikemen are back here. They could be really useful in the late game actually, if it comes down to it having the pike advantage late on. That phalanx can be a really big deal. Serpent's Fangs getting into a better position to shoot. What are they going to shoot at? Customize Rangers? That would be the best choice, I think. The catapult is The catapult is more likely to work for you. Yeah, you can see there as well some of the Hashari stalkers actually targeting down the Castamir's Rangers as well. So the momentum all of a sudden has shifted to Harad. They are pushing forward, and perhaps Umbar needs to be a little bit more decisive with choosing when to fall back potentially to the last stand. Corsair pikemen trying to help out the situation over here, but it's trollmen, so unless they can keep the trollmen at arm's length, they are going to be in a bit of trouble. Southron pikemen. Champions of Nafrat, victory seems certain, which is quite interesting because the Umbar front line actually looks like it's pretty well organised here. Southrons. A lot of Southrons pushing through. Still got a pretty healthy unit of Trollmen over there as well, and yes indeed, Serpent's Fangs and Champions of Nafrat. So they're not throwing everything in, they do still have a little bit more to deal with what they will perceive to be, I'm sure, a last stand. There is a way that goes around here as well, so there's plenty more ways this battle could have gone through the settlement. We've seen it be more about a fight for the residential area more so than through the walls systematically. Also Blackguards retreating, poison arrows raining down over here, Trollmen of Harad continuing to push forward to try and go after the Rangers and the catapult crew. There's only 5 catapult crewmen remaining, so it's possible here that if they get a little bit too close, the catapult could be made useless by killing that crew off, and with arrows as well, if Harad get fortunate, the catapult could be a thing of the past. Something they no longer need concern themselves with. Trollmen are moving in. Having said that, it's not worth throwing your infantry under such a bus just to go after the catapult. You do need to recognise the return on investment for that. Balakith Axguard moving forward to try and bail them out. There's also those fencers with daggers in hand. And of course they could just take the more direct route to the last stand as well, through the trees here. Are these routing units on the outside of the settlement? I would assume they are, yeah. 2 pikemen. Yeah. Nothing to concern ourselves with out there. Still, this little bit of Umbar resistance continues to do its level best. And of course that's the benefit of having these Black Numenorians once again. Locked morale, they will fight to the bitter end. Even if they're not getting you kills, they are getting you time. The most valuable commodity of all. There's a lot of Trollmen in here. A bad sign perhaps for Umbar that they still need to tackle this many Trollmen in melee as we move into the late game. Alcarondas Legion back here. Ashari Stalkers making a nuisance of themselves. Have they managed to get the catapult out of there? No is the answer to that. So they have managed to shut the catapult down permanently now, Harad. You'd have to say it hasn't really pulled its own weight. It's got a lot of friendly fire. The hits into the enemy it has got, none of them have been especially devastating. None of them game-changing. So artillery for the defenders, not being as effective as it otherwise could have been. Always going to feel like a big victory, that, for attackers. These Royal Guard probably backing up a decent kill count for themselves at this point. 1 champion of Nafrat from Dabaduba getting in here, and units like this tend to hit enemies so hard that they have that crazy kill animation where they go mental and then T-pose 2D into the ground. You love to see it. Medieval 2 at its finest. Over here, well, there goes Sneakman's general. His camel posse finally getting shot up. Balakith marksman from Eclipse. Are they going to try and move forward here, Umbar, or are they going to be content to hold up here? There's 1 Demon of the Desert. I mean, he's up here. I mean, he's going to die now, surely. Yeah, I don't know how he managed to get all the way through there. Incredible scenes. And there goes one of the attacking Harad armies. Froggy pushing through with his Trollman. Umbar need a unified approach to this. That's been Harad's problem throughout this battle so far. But now Umbar are in danger here. I think Eclipse, he needs to, not to put it lightly, but get off his arse and move these units in to support his allies, because his allies are getting torn up. It's not going terribly for Umbar, but I'm not really a big fan of this. I'll sit back on the hill and let you take the heat for me. But we'll see. Serpent's Fangs moving around the back, maybe keeping them in reserve will be the key. Flaming Shot being utilised. Harad looking like routing. I mean, the Trollmen won't. Hashari moving forward. Do they still have ammo? Harad actually getting themselves surrounded. This is the downside to still having to deal with the Umbar units that are over here. Once again, it all comes down to unifying your approach. Harad have been more guilty of not doing that than Umbar, but then you would expect Umbar to have it easier in those terms because, like I said, they're the defenders. It's much harder to get that bit wrong when your objective is clear. This is a lot of Hashari though. They're good when there's not a lot of range support, although if those Balakith marksmen do still have ammunition it will be a problem. They've managed to surround the surround now, have Harad, with the Serpent's Fangs moving forward. Here are the Casimir's Rangers, presumably out of ammunition. They have been used quite a lot so far. And the Serpent's Fangs are far the superior unit in melee. Another player admits defeat. I'm not sure who that would be. Froggy continuing to push forward. This unit of Alcarondas Legion getting in the way of everything, really, from a Harad perspective. More damage being done by the Hashari. There's some Hashari Stalkers back there as well. What is this? Narun Aru Royal Guard. As they trudge their way forward, the Serpent's Fangs, Champions of Nafarat. That's, again, 83 Champions of Nafarat in the late game. That is significant. More Trollmen. It's always a worry if you're facing off against Harad and they still have those kinds of units in numbers towards the end. Because fighting them in melee is such a dangerous proposition. Their lower armour does mean that you can whittle them down at range and then they're far weaker. Not the best melee defence either. And I don't know whether Umbar have got what it takes to actually meet such a challenge in melee at this point, which sounds weird, but when you consider that Umbar had to be more sparing with their heavier units on this occasion. Perhaps not the most surprising thing. Morris still has his Royal Guard, and is general as a result, I think. Does he? Yeah, there he is. Dressed in gold, as Castamere likes to be. Again, these units over here. Should they not be being committed forward? Because that is where Umbar's strongest units are. Balakith Marksmen doing a good job here at overwhelming the Trollmen that have bitten off slightly more than they can chew. These Alcarondas Legion doing a good job as well, which is surprising considering the Hashari and the Serpent's Fangs are both very strong units, but now here come another wave of units, including those that were just victorious against the final Black Numenorians that were holding on over here. But this is a large amount of units that they've kept at bay for a little while at this point. And yeah, Serpent's Fangs, they still have ammunition. They've still got their bows drawn, which... that's interesting. Again, more depleted Trollmen over here. Of course, their fencers should have enough to kill off this many Trollmen at the very least, but they seem to be content to ignore the Trollmen as they nibble away at the back end of their unit so far. Blackguard, so it's mostly Eclipse's army that still remains. Most of the actual labourers of the settlement at this stage have perished, so they will need to find new fishermen, even if they are victorious. Some hits being delivered to this Harajam attack. Surely at this point the Alcarondas Legion defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Those Shotels hoisted aloft. Always helpful to have a unit of archers, which is also a very good infantry unit. Having multifaceted units. I mean, the Balakith Marksmen are that as well, albeit less spectacular than the Serpent's Fangs can be in melee. But a nice makeshift line infantry unit, which are proving to be an important part of the defence late on here, the Balakith Marksmen. They could rout that unit from Froggy pretty quickly here as well, with the red lines so close. And again, more unified, needs to be a bit more unified this from Harad. Dribbling these units in when they're so depleted isn't going to gain you much. I suppose you can't go this way then. Can't go through this. This is impassable terrain. Which is a little bit surprising. It looks like you should be able to get through there, but the intricacies of some of the buildings can be a little bit misleading. Balakith Marksmen backing the Alcarondas Legion up. I mean, they're okay as a line infantry unit, but I don't think they will be enough to turn this fight around, especially not with a few more Serpent Guard being added to the mix. Harad will ultimately be victorious over here. Serpents, no, not Serpent's Fangs. Ashari Stalkers. They've got their scimitars drawn. What is this? This is a little bit gung-ho from Umbar. Again, a potentially questionable decision to charge Balakith Marksmen into Champions of Nafrat like this. It's probably not going to go too well for them. Not the kind of unit they're particularly good at fighting. And even if they do get through, the Serpent's Fangs will best them in melee. So it's not as if they're gaining much of anything there either. The Naruna Ira Royal Guard under normal circumstances would win the skirmish fight between the two. But the Serpent's Fangs, there's far more of them at this point, and they should have far more ammunition as well. So Harad, for once, is going to be bullying Umbar at long range. Mid-range Harad can of course bully them with their jabbies, but under normal circumstances. But it's less common to see archers do that. And now the Balakith Marksmen running from the front line as Harad victorious, charging down the street. And they will now assault the settlement leader's manor. Serpent's Fangs continuing to lay down some covering fire as they approach. While the shields are on their back, rather confusingly, the shield value only applies from the front. It's just one of those things about Medieval 2, so you are actually better off shooting the Naruna Royal Guard in the back if you can. Forward come the Serpent's Fangs again. Harad need to be careful, they need to unify their attack, and I think with that, they should be okay. I don't know. I mean, if they don't unify their attack, I definitely think they won't be okay. 37 elite pikes, plenty of Naruna Royal Guard, the Harbingers of Castamere to offer that genuine damage-dealing potential. Fencers are decent in melee, not quite the monsters they once were, but still useful enough. Blackguards can hold their own. It's close, this. In come the Serpent's Fangs. Froggy can't afford to sit his trollmen back there like that. That could be the killer for Harad if he does that. They need everything in here. Brute force. Using up all of their strength all at once. Southron Pikemen are moving forward. Yeah, now they're moving forward. I was really worried that he was going to keep them back there and just... Again, it always baffles me when people do that, because it's like, what are you saving your units for? But I'm glad that he saw the light and will move them forward. But I still will criticise the fact they weren't moving in at the same time as all the rest of these units, because that could be what ultimately loses Harad this fight. We see the dancing swords of the Hasharan. Very weird bug, that. Something that only affects them. Naruna Royal Guard will be able to shoot into the side, but they will also be getting shot for their trouble as well, but they won't mind that. They'll just want to shoot into something more squishy, like the Hasharian. I don't know, I think Umbar have got this. I think all of the moments in the fight we've seen where Harad have not quite been singing off the same hymn sheet, as it were, I think that will come back to bite them ultimately. If they can get these trollmen through this gap over here, bludgeon through and start working up the line, it could very well be different. Because the Champions of Nafrat are here. They need to be shooting into the Champions of Nafrat, to be honest. I mean, the Hashari Stalkers are one thing, but... Here come the... You know, actually, I wasn't considering the fact that there's 100 Serpent's Fangs back here as well that can be used as infantry. That might be enough for Harad. Yeah, actually, that might be enough for Harad to be victorious here. Too many defensive units as well. That's impressive if Harad can pull that off, honestly. 4v4 sieges are not quite the easy task they are for the attackers, considering the kind of armies it was as well. And it could be that Morris's very reckless attack out at the front of the settlement right from the off, with a lot of Corsairs that went poorly, may have dug Umbar a hole from which they won't be escaping from. It is starting to look that way. They're trying their best here, and they certainly have a lot of heavy units left, Umbar. Eclipse also keeping all of these elite units back here. Either he should have committed them earlier, or more should have been retreated back up here so that there was more of a last stand to make. As it is, I think the strength of the Trollmen is going to be enough. Wasn't considering the fact that they still had those Serpent's Fangs at the back. 100 of them. There goes another general. 41 Serpent's Fangs from Froggy as well. Bit of a topsy-turvy battle this, but it is looking as though Umbar will be losing CALDUN. Doing okay there, but that's more because of the pikes rather than Aru Sentinels. I mean, it is remarkably close, this. If they win Umbar, it will, I think, come down to the fact they still have those Aru Sentinels, which are really hard to fight straight up, but they shouldn't need to fight them straight up, they should be able to surround them here. And I wouldn't say that the Haradrim's judgment has been brilliant throughout the fight. There's been several instances where I would have done something different. But that one choice, like, there's been some reckless calls from Umbar, which may have put paid to their chances of winning. I mean, they're winning over here as well, to be fair, Umbar. Can they yet dig themselves out of this hole? Black Numenorian Valor. They're going to try and shoot those heavier units. They're going to try and... Well, I mean, they don't really have a choice but to try and hunt down these fences, because if they allow the fences to get free, their missiles will be more devastating than anything the Serpent's Fangs are able to inflict on the Numenorians. You won't break the Black Numenorians with the poison arrows, it's purely a damage question. The Harbingers are all gone, but so too are the Champions of Nafrat at this point. Serpent's Fangs doing their thing. Incredibly close. Hashari fighting evenly with the Corsair Blackguard apparently, but Umbar are going to win over here, and then they can of course move forward to try and intrude upon these Serpent's Fangs, who are going to have to... It looks like they just ran out of ammo actually, which is fortunate for them, so they could do no more at range, and now they're going to try and get into melee, and they will outperform the Naru Royal Guard in melee. When they're both at full strength, the Royal Guard are what you want for the ranged fight of attrition. When it comes to being in melee, however, those big two-handed Shotels will give you more of the good damage that you're looking for. Those Corsair fences are slowly being worked down by the Trollman, so Harad will win that fight. Harad will probably... well, I don't know, I mean... They should win this fight, or will they? I think Umbar will actually... Very Pyrrhic victory for whoever wins that. It depends on whether the pikes can keep them at arm's length. A nail-biting finish to this. That extra unit of Serpent's Fangs in melee could be absolutely vital. They're trying to get really in and amongst all of these Royal Guardsmen. Those South ones haven't routed either, so they are doing their masters proud, continuing to swing as long as they are able to. Do the Serpent's Fangs have an inspiration effect? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, because in this version of Reforged the inspiration effects are broken. That will not be the case in the upcoming patch, however. It'll be really interesting to see how the meta changes as a result of those being turned on. Yeah, those Trollmen are victorious. So yeah, Harad will win. Those Trollmen are victorious. Close though. The one huge lapse in judgment from Umbar, more severe than the several smaller lapses in judgment from Harad, as it turns out. So Harad victorious. This is going to be the end, as we go up to ×2 speed. Interesting mountains in the distance. Rather pointy locale. And these are pikes, so their stats are good for pikemen, but as soon as their formation is compromised by something as damaging as the Trollman, that's going to be it. There's one champion of Nafrat left, actually. He lives on. 2 Corsair Fencers. Not much at all, though. 2% all that's in it. And Harad will hoist the banner of the Black Serpent over this sleepy little town. Another Umbar general falls. I don't think losing heart is the problem Umbar often have. They are a faction because of their locked morale at the high end that do need to be slain to the last man. And that is exactly what's going to happen here. But a good fight this, and another good scenario by Morris. And there you can see the floating swords of the Hashari. Even though they're dead, the swords live on. A really weird bug that is. It'd be a shame when that's fixed in many ways, because it's just so wacky. And there we go. The last fighting combatant of Harad. I don't know about that. I think I wouldn't have been too unimpressed if either side had won, but fair play to Harad. Gimel card is a Black Numenorian name, so it should be the other way around, surely. Regardless, Harad with the victory. Kills on both sides. It is interesting, generally speaking, Harad actually breaking over the kill counts of many of the defenders today, which is strange. One of the Umbar armies going above and beyond, though, getting nearly 3,000 kills. Regardless, let's see what did the damage for Umbar. A lot of the skirmishes, I'd imagine, because both sides' skirmishes were really the main event. But yeah, Narun Reforged, the Sentinels doing quite well in their fight. The Alcarondas Legion also doing pretty well. But yeah, Balakith Marksmen very well for themselves, and as well as the Corsair Blackguards. 204 kills on Royal Guard once again. Harbingers did okay, I suppose, considering they're a bodyguard unit. You might want a bit more. Alcarondas Faithful, the initial cavalry engagements went Umbar's way. Balakith Marksmen once again doing quite nicely. Down here, Narun Royal Guard once again. So yeah, the Royal Guard for Umbar really doing the heavy lifting. 685 on Casimir's Rangers. That's certainly an acceptable level of kills for them. Crossbows. That unit of Blackguard's not getting quite so much, only 29. Could have made a difference. The Catapult as well. There is something RNG about Medieval 2's artillery, but when you choose to use it can make a difference and tilt those odds in your favour. I feel as though when the Catapult was used probably wasn't the best of decisions, but such as it is. And then over here again, the Royal Guard doing quite nicely. Corsair Crossbows, Blackguards and the like. So yeah, the Trollmen units for Harad I'm sure were a standout, as well as all the skirmishers. Also the Camels did quite well in that middle section when the defenders were doing their customary pullback to deeper within the settlement. So yeah, big thank you to Morris for sending this battle replay to me, and a big thank you to all of the players for being a part of it. Thank you to Morris as well for making another good scenario. It's always good to see more people making these very enjoyable scenarios to watch and commentate on. But yeah, long may that continue. I've still got one more scenario actually that I got sent on made by Froggy on a broken version of CALDUN, which will probably be the first scenario that I record when I arrive at my new place. So I feel as though this will be the last one that I record while I'm still here. I've said that a few times at this point, but I've found enough time to actually get in another fairly beefy recording session going, so I'm just going to try and give myself as much of a margin for error as possible, which is ever so just shy. I think it's like 3 or 4 days shy of 2 months worth that I've managed to build up now. So I've got plenty of margin for error. If I find myself unable to record for a while at a time, that should be enough of a margin for me. At least I hope so. That's the great hope. But we'll see about that. Again, I can't really comment on how that's going to work until I've actually lived it for a little while. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.